It's Christmas, and so we're gonna talk about the Yule and its pagan origins. Stick around. Welcome back, another Friday, another episode. Here we are again. It's Christmas, and of course it's the celebration on which we celebrate, of course, the birth of Jesus Christ. Is it really though? Are we really celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ? That's the question that we're going to explore today. And of course we had two more episodes already released. They were about the Dutch Sinterklaas festival, or the European Saint Nicholas that we have discussed, and we've talked about the Black Piet, Zwarte Piet, and his pagan origins. So for this episode, I'm assuming you already saw them. So if you haven't seen them yet, there's a link where you can check them both out. So with that said, we're gonna dive into the origins of Saint Nicholas, and for all my American friends out there, that would be Santa Claus. As we call him in Dutch, we call him the Christmas man, as in many other European countries. So, in order to get that presentation started, let me get my time machine up. So here we are, my time machine, an exploration of the European Saint Nicholas rituals. As I said, it's important that you already saw the other episode, so we can hit the ground running. If not, well, then stick along, because it's gonna be a wild ride. All right, so who's Santa Claus? Well, of course, he's the Coca-Cola man. As we know, it's an American export product, as many other commercial things. But could he be a psychedelic mushroom? Could he be the Norse god of Odin? Or could he be even a demonic entity, as New Age Christians would like you to believe? Let's look at this, because Santa Claus is very much it's a tradition that is formed in the United States, and for being able to understand this, of course, we have a depiction here of the New England tradition of Saint Nicholas, and in the back you can see the three wise men. You can also see his reindeer. So already it's a merger of many different things. You can see the evergreen crown that he has on his head, and the presents, and even he has a Christmas tree. So many different elements to look upon, and we're gonna dissect all of them today. So first of all, we need to understand the American melting pot. Many different cultures came in there. So of course, when the United States, America as a continent as a whole, but particularly in the United States, it was very much a melting pot of all different kinds of cultures. You had the Irish, you had the Germans, you had the French, you had the Polish, you had the Dutch, you had the Scandinavians, being Sweden, Norwegian, and Finland. And of course, there were Scottish, and there were all kinds of things like... in the previous picture, you even saw Santa Claus without any legs, without any leg covering up, so with bare legs. So yeah, that reminds me of the Scottish thing. And then, it merges all together into one particular kind of entity that then over time gets exported again back to Europe. And so that's why we don't have a name for the Christmas man, as we call him, or in other places they call him Grandfather Christmas, or they call him Father Christmas, or even Father Snow, Father Time. So there's no real name for him in Europe. And of course, the name Santa Claus, it comes from the Dutch Sinterklaas, Santa Claus. And yeah, in the Netherlands, we have both of them. The commercialized version of it, it's another reason to keep buying more things. And so, yeah, of course, we know American culture is a very expansionistic culture. So, and it spreads the ideas and the symbols, they spread more and more. And that hasn't been the first time that has happened in history, as we will see today. So stick around and you're gonna find out more about that. Okay, so first of all, Christmas. It's not called Christmas. Of course, Christ comes from the word Christ. And Mass is the Mass of it's the whole term Christmas is a very Christian term, but it wasn't called Christmas before, as it's still called in different regions of Europe. Still, it's called the Yule. Or the Yule, and the name Yule derives from the word the wheel, and well, the Yule is very important as we look, for instance, to very old cultures in Europe. I mean, particularly the Oera Linda book, which we have talked about on this channel a lot. We know that the Yule, there's in Europe, there's two particular versions of it that were very prominent. In the Oera Linda book, the six-spoke wheel is very prominent. In the Christmas traditions, the four-spoked wheel is very prominent, and the reason for that is that it's a point of midwinter. So what you have, for instance, you have the quarter solar year. So it's the whole year is divided up into 4 quarters. So the 4 seasons, as you might know them, and that would be the winter and the summer solstice, both on the July and December month, and it would be the spring and the autumn equinoxes in spring and autumn. They cut up the entire year in 4 neat particular parts that each of them they had their specific symbols in pagan origins. So, from the Oera Linda book we can read the primary symbol of Ralda and the potential or the beginning from which came time, the bearer who must conduct the Yule in its circuit forever. So right away we can see there's a spinning motion of the wheel and the wheel, it represents time, and time being able to repeat itself again and again and again. And so we're having to repeat the same patterns again, and it's a good a metaphor for how we go through time, and that the things that we're reliving through today, it has all been relived through in the past again. And so that's a good idea to keep in mind when you're thinking about the Yule festival. It's like, okay, we have gone through this year again, and now it's dark, but it will become light again. And so the fact that it's like this black hole, but all of a sudden light will come again. It's very important in pagan Christian tradition, pagan pre-Christian traditions. So, thus, it is not unfitting that we should celebrate the Yule every year. And so that's what we still do. We still celebrate the Yule. Although we call it now Christmas, it is still the same tradition that we keep doing every year and year again, even though we don't really know why. Why would we do that? Why would we celebrate a guy with a red hat bringing presents to everyone that we call Saint Nicholas, but doesn't even look like a saint? And he wears boughs of holly, and we do these rituals, these celebrations, these festivities. We do them every year, and we have no idea why. We have no idea what the real reason behind them is. And so that's why this is called the paradigm shift, because we're going to explore all of it. So in the background, you can see the nice Gundestrup cauldron. It has been featured in this show before. But for the midwinter festivals, in the oldest ancient ideas, there would be a couple of things would be very important. And first of all would be the transformation of the old into the new. So that would would be represented with fire. So fire is also, of course, it's a form of light. But as we have discussed in the previous episode about the black peat phenomenon with the horns and everything, well, he uses the soot, and the soot is the fertility, and of course the fertility, it spreads new crops. So once you burn the old, that also gives the potential for the new and something new to arrive. So very important symbol. And then another thing which is very important is the guide in the darkest night of the year. That's when you light the fire, and the fire is very, very important. Very important in the Oera Linda book as well, where they keep the internal fire going. So very, very traditional pre-Christian symbol. Also, another belief that comes very much along in the Yule festival is that the veil between us and the ancestors is very thin. So we're very close to whoever came before us. And that's also a connection with the wheel again. So at this point in time, we have been here already again. Our ancestors has been here again, and we can connect with that point. So a very, very neat symbolic representation all has to do with the Yule. And then it's celebrated with a lot of noise, a lot of bells and whistles, and noise comes along, and rattling and blowing through horns is very, very common in all of Europe and all these traditional feasts. And of course, all of this is all to celebrate or leading into the fertility. And fertility in this tradition, old European culture that we call the Vrijens, they would celebrate the women, and they would celebrate the fertility of the women, because of course women are the bearers of the fertility. Of course, without women you would have no children. You would have no place to place your seed. There is very important, and so this traditionally would also be a time in which women would get pregnant. And of course, if you get women pregnant on the December month, then they will give birth in autumn. And autumn, of course, is the time when food is all around you. So there's enough food to get a good start for young children to get fed, and of course there's abundance everywhere. So very important time of the year, when we get to the Yule and what the Yule is, the etymology. So of course we have the word Yule, and it translates to the wheel, and it translates to time, but there's a different one. So in Dutch we have the word Julen, which means shouting or crying out, and then in the Alps you have yodeling, and then in English you have jolly. In Dutch we have joler. So it has to do with a lot of merry, a lot of fun, a lot of external letting go of things, and it's all connected to Yule, and it's very important etymological connections there. So then, of course, to connect it all together, this is an image from 25 to 20,000 years ago. So that's before the last ice age, very important, and you can see her with a horn. So, the horn might have been something to drink out, it might have been a musical instrument, but also, of course, we know that there were these animals with horns. So somehow, this is not in the Oera Linda book, but somehow in the surrounding culture of the European traditions, the horn was important. And of course, we have the idea of the horn of plentifulness, and this is connected with feasting and a lot of food, which of course connects with autumn harvest. So important symbology and very misunderstood. So I'm happy that I can order this all for you. And then, of course, the mothers. Mothers are very important, very much celebrated in the Frisian culture. Now, of course, how do you celebrate the mother? Well, you celebrate the mother by depicting her with a child. Now, very interestingly, these images with a mother and child, or Madonna with child, or they're found everywhere around the entire world. They're found through all ages, incorporated in all different cultures. However, we don't find them in Frisian culture. We have not found any depictions like this, and so they appear to have a different source, but yeah, of course, we never know. They might show up one day, because of course we know that the Frisian culture, it all sank down to the bottom of the sea with Doggerland, and everything's destroyed. But it wouldn't surprise me if at one point we would find Frisian imagery or an idol in some way or form. Although we also know that the Frisian people, they weren't really idolizing in this way, so it might be very foreign to them to make an idolatrous figure of who they worshipped. All right, and then two very important symbols. The mistletoe, it stands for fertility. Part of the evergreen decorations. We have evergreen decorations in as long as time goes back, and we will dive into that a little bit more. So we decorate the halls. What's the saying? Of course, deck the halls with boughs of jolly. Now this is not jolly in this case, but evergreen. They are the epitome of that life will come again. If an evergreen tree dies, now that's when you know you're in trouble. So very important, also in connection with a Christmas tree. And of course, there's something that's called the Yule log, and it's a one big log that people used to drag into their house, put into the fireplace, and this log would burn for days and days and days. And so that's what people, it would be an you would eat more food than you would get, and you would raise more warmth than you would normally do. So very much connected. And then of course, in some places people make food out of the Yule log. So I mean, doesn't that look delicious? I mean, I want to eat it right now. All right, so yeah, next up, there's this merger with the animists. And so how do we know this? Well, we know this because this comes from the Oera Linda book. So in the Oera Linda book, we have this culture, and they talk about the Finda people coming into their lands. And well, just let me read it so you get an understanding. They believe that everywhere are evil spirits that enter into people and animals. But of Ralda spirits, they know nothing. The Finns have stone weapons, while the weapons of the Magyars are copper. The Magyars claim that they can summon and banish the evil spirits. The Finns are constantly in fear because of this, and their faces never show signs of joy. And then, not much later, they continue. 80 years later, the Yule feast has begun. They assaulted us unexpectedly and fell over our lands like a blizzard. Those who could not flee were cut down. So, very, very old account of how the Finns and the Frisians, they would have a clash, and this clash would take place at the Yule. And of course, the Finns, they are like a kind of people, but they are controlled by the Magyars. So they're separate people, but the Magyars are kind of like the puppet masters of what the Finns are doing and what they believe in and what they're controlled by fear. And so we know how control by fear works, of course. And it's a very interesting correlation, of course, when we think of that. The wheel of time gets spun around every time and time again. So people controlled by fear is well, it's maybe something for a different episode. For now, let's stick to the Yule. So what we have here is we have Odin, and a depiction that I made with AI to have them represent the Finns. And why did I do this? Well, because in the traditional story of the Oera Linda book, it's told that once that the Finns came over the land, that's when the Fryan people, they retaliated. And one of the people who went and fight the Finns, his name was called Wodan. And that's, of course, that's the how he became Odin. And, you know, it's the same person. Also in Scandinavia, it's called Yulnir. It's a connection with Yule, of course. So all of this is very connected with each other. Odin is very much connected to the Yule as well. And so what can we read about him? Well, we read of his origins in the Oera Linda book. And I will read to you. When the northern brothers had joined him, Woden divided his powerful armies into three. Freya was their war cry, and thus he drove back the Finns and the Magyars, as if they were children. When the Magi heard how his men were all being slain, he sent messengers with a scepter and a crown, and they said to Odin, "O you greatest of all kings, we are guilty, but all that we have done was done from necessity. You believe that we took your brothers willingly, but we were whipped forth by our enemies, who are all still at our heels. We have often asked aid of your burgmaid, but she ignored us. The Magi said that if we persist in fighting and killing one another, the wild herdsmen will come and kill us all. The Magi possess great riches, but he has seen that Freya is more powerful than all our spirits combined. He wishes to lay his head down in her lap. You are the most heroic king on earth. Your folk are of iron. Become our king, and we shall willingly become your slaves. What honor would you earn if you could drive back the savages? Our horns would be filled with the tidings, and our praises would precede you everywhere." And so this is where we see how the Finns and the Magyars, they kind of encapsulated Odin. They kind of made him king of who they were. And so right away you can see that the Fryans, they had no connection with anything like Freys, the slaves. The Fryans, they were a people of freedom, and they wanted everyone to be free. They didn't want anyone to be a slave. And so this is where Odin, or Woden, he gets corrupted and he becomes the master of slaves. And right away you can see that there's an influence of the Magyars here. And I've talked about this in a previous episode where I said, like, well, who are the Magi? And we can see that the Magi, they practiced a form of deification. So they conquered the people by deifying. And so if something miraculous would happen, they would say, oh, that's a god, or that's a spirit, or that's something, and they would encapsulate it in their worldview, and they would spread that worldview around. And so these magi, I've speculated, this is a speculation, that they would wear these kind of elongated hats made of gold. Why am I making this speculation? Because they have stars everywhere on their hat, and they appear to have this connection with this knowledge of this ancient knowledge of stars. And so interesting, perhaps they would even have a whip, and the whip is a very important symbol fertility. And so if you would have a whip, then you can corrupt it as well. If the whip is first used for fertility, for whipping the fertility into the land, then you can also use a whip, of course, for torture and whipping other people forth, as has been described in the Oera Linda book. So very important symbology and very important history that's not a lot talked about in the integrative culture of pre-Christian Europe. All right, this is from Finland and Sweden. It's the Julupukki, or the Julebokken, and this is a tradition where people dress up, and they dress up in a goat kind of form with the horns. The horns are very important. We see the horn symbology all over Europe, but very important in the Scandinavian Yule festivities. Here we see a picture of from 1947. And we see it in the festivity, the Christmas tree in the back, and there's a feast. And even the person on the right, he looks a little bit like a saint. So it might even be that the local priest might be involved, or the local bishop. So very interesting connection there, and it all ties back. All right. So the Wild Hunt. The Wild Hunt is something that is very common in Polish and German mythology, or it's not even mythology, it's more like a cultural significant event that takes place. And what the Wild Hunt would be something that would be terrifying. So you would stay indoors, you would not go out there. When the Wild Hunt would be going on, you would stay inside and you would await and see what would happen. And the Wild Hunt would be a hunter group, particularly they would be on horses, and over here you can see them also with dogs. I'm gonna have to interrupt this presentation because we're gonna talk about our sponsor. Yeah, you want to talk about our sponsor too, Nala? Eh? All right, come join me. We're going to talk about our sponsor, and our sponsor, of course, is Druid Secret. Druid Secret, I mean, what else do I have to say, you guys? You know, it's the main supporter of this show. We could not make this show if we wouldn't have Druid Secret, and we wouldn't have you guys visiting that website and checking out. It's a fantastic website that will give you access to all kinds of CBD oil and any other kind of things that you might need for your pagan medicine cabinet. You know, CBD oil, what else do I have to say? It's good for arthritis. If you're suffering from pain in your hands or anything else, if you're having any issues or problems during the time of the month, if you're a female or anything, make sure that you take some CBD oil, because that will lighten your mood. Now, also, I'm giving CBD oil to my dog. You know, Nala, you like CBD oil? Hey, yeah. She gets the CBD oil because, you know, it's healthy, it's good for her. Now, it's definitely, I would never drug my dog. I couldn't ever give anything to my dog that is psychoactive. And so that's a good marker to know that the CBD oil, it is definitely is non-psychoactive. So if you're afraid of anything, of going anywhere, anything like that, it's completely good for staying present in a moment or anything like that. It will not change your state of consciousness. You will get a good experience by using this product. So, what do you say? Is it time to go? All right, I'm gonna leave you guys there. So, with a recommendation from Nala, go to druidsecret.com, use the code ParadigmShift and get a 5% discount on anything that you might need for your modern day medicine cabinet. And we'll continue with this episode. They would be, traditionally, they would be led by Odin. You can see with the antlers, very, very common connection with the Wild Hunt. There would be the association with thunder. So if thunder would go outside, then a Wild Hunt might be going on, and people would even they would go outside and they would carry a bread and a stick of iron. So, and the stick of iron would be that if lightning would strike, then you could throw the stick of iron, and lightning would be said that would be struck by the lightning, and the bread you could throw to the dogs, so the dogs wouldn't get you. And so it's a thing that people would be fearful about, but also would be connected with something that would be a celebration. The Wild Hunt would not be, there wouldn't be humans, there would be spirits. And these spirits, they often would be recruited. And so we have a lot of depictions of where people would be slain and then resurrected to be raised in the army of the dead that would then have their place within the Wild Hunt. And in particular with Odin would seek out his companions very much. He would go up to the biggest fighter or the particular kind of person that he would find very valuable, and he would kill him, and then he would resurrect him. And then as a resurrected spirit, he would then give him gifts, and this gift would be often like a weapon or something like that. And so he would become a part of this army of the dead, and then they would go on the Wild Hunt. It's a very interesting symbol. So Odin also would be called Grimnir. He would be called, it would stand for the mask bearer. So you would see Odin, but you wouldn't see that it was Odin. And it would be something that it could not really be seen. It would be happening, but you wouldn't see it. And also there would be stories of that you could be abducted to the fairy world. So lots of interesting symbology right there. All right, so this is in England that we have Herne the Hunter. And Herne the Hunter, he was a royal huntsman of the Windsor Forest in Berkshire, UK. And his story was that he was resurrected after a mortal wound while he had like a hunting accident and he would be killed. And after that he was resurrected. And as part of the cure of the resurrection, he would have deer antlers, and he would walk around with these deer antlers, and or stag antlers. Yeah, that would be his position, and he would roam the forest till after his death. And it's kind of like this traditional like ghost story of eternal unrest, and yeah, he would be betrayed as well. It's a common, the betrayal is a common motif as well in England. Connected with storm, lightning, and the power of the wild, very much powerful symbology. And yeah, he rides a horse. So you know, if the Wild Hunt would come to England, Herne the Hunter would immediately would be allowed to join, because he definitely fits the description. Next up we have Sleipnir. And Sleipnir is the horse of Odin. And the horse of Odin, he would have 8 legs, and he flies swiftly through the skies. And here we see a depiction of him and the Gotland picture stone, which is you know, from 1,000 years ago. So this is just to show that this tradition goes back very old. That's not proper English, but you know, I know you guys are catching on. So Saint Nicholas, in the Netherlands tradition, Saint Nicholas only goes on a horse. Nowhere else in Europe does he really go on a horse. I mean, we saw some pictures in Germany where he's riding his horse, and his companion also rides a horse, but nowhere else really in Southern Europe does he ride a horse. And so that's definitely a connection with the Wild Hunt. The fact that Odin rides a 8-legged horse, that's a connection with the 8 reindeer of Santa Claus. And notice that both Sinterklaas and both Santa Claus, they land on the roof of a house. and so that's the connection with Sleipnir, who is able to be to fly through the sky and land on houses and all of that. So very, very interesting connections there. Then we have Odin himself, and he always has two ravens. Now I found this picture, but of course we have AI, so let's look at him in color. So the two ravens, important symbology for Odin, because the two ravens, they would stand for thought and memory, and he would have them both on his shoulders. And whenever his ravens, when they would die, he would lose his thoughts and he would lose his memory. But these ravens are very important, because notice that they're birds, and birds are also, we're going to find more commonality with birds in the European traditions, but also the fact that there's two of them is something very important, because that doesn't come from Europe. That comes from a Eastern European tradition, and they would have two pillars. And these two pillars, you will find them a lot also in Freemason symbology, and they would stand for gathering knowledge, and there would be a left brain and there would be a right brain, and also connect this with Santa, who also knows everything. He doesn't have to inquire. He has elves maybe that will tell him something, but he has knowledge. The knowledge is embedded in the imagery. And so on the right you see Neo-Babylonia, Iraq. So yeah, that's more than 2,500 years ago. And there we can see the pillars, and we can also see the horns. So we can see perhaps this was the ideas that the Magyars brought with them, is that you should have two pillars on the side of a god, and they would have this representation. So in France we have Père Fouettard, or also translated in English as Father Flog. And Father Flog, he would flog people. And he's not a nice guy, but he became very much a tradition. So he has this bird with him as well. He's accompanied by this swift, and the swift would be like a black bird, and this would be his friend. So very reminiscent of Odin. There's this story in which Père Fouettard is in a tavern somewhere, and he comes across three traveling rich kids, and they're very pious, and of course they represent innocence themselves, and he goes and kills them. And not only that, he puts them in a pot, and he cuts them up, and he pickles them, and he puts them in a cauldron. And very important is because Saint Nicholas, he then shows up, and after he shows up, he revives the children, and then the children, they become alive again. And then after that, Père Fouettard, he joins Saint Nicholas, and he becomes his companion. And so we see that in the modern day way that they still celebrate him, where Père Fouettard is his accompanying helper. Also, he gives the children coal. So, if you're wondering where the coal comes from, well, look to France. The story of the cauldron is very reminiscent of stories that came from Ireland, or I'm saying this wrong, the reminiscence of stories that came from Wales. So it dates back to the Iron Age, and so the cauldron of rebirth is also called the Père d'Adénie, and it's written about in the Mabinogion. Excuse my pronunciation. I'm sure there's people in the comments who can do way better than me, but yeah, it's a similar idea, is that people could be revived with the cauldron of rebirth. And so you could be resurrected, although there would be a downside to this, and the same that Herod the Hunter was, he was resurrected with antlers. These people that would be revived, they would be mute, and they would have no individuality, so they would be forced to join perhaps an army of the dead. And so there's this idea that they would be recruited as warriors. So perhaps Odin, Woden would have this magical cauldron that he could revive people in. So interesting combination of all different kinds of cultures that don't necessarily have anything to do with each other, but if you dive deeper and you connect them all together, you can see that there's this storyline that spread all over Europe and that had different incarnations of a similar kind of festivity. Next up, all right, yeah, so this is in the Prose Edda from Snorri Sturluson. We can also see Odin with this cauldron, and so we can see that this particular story of the cauldron, it comes from this place in Wales. Yeah, of course, when Snorri Sturluson, which was an Icelandic writer, he wrote it down. Of course, this was already merged, but yeah, we can see a reminiscence of that. Interesting writer and drawer, Snorri Sturluson, because here we can see Odin, and we almost never see him in red and white, but here we see him in red and white, and so very traditional outfit to be wearing red and white. And we can see him with the birds and the sun and the sword to be slain. And what is that in his left hand? What is he holding? He's holding a staff, staff that he might have gotten with his crown from the Magyars, but it almost looks like something that resembles a mushroom. And there we go. We have the Amanita Muscaria. And the Amanita Muscaria is a symbol that's often talked about when we talk about the history of Christmas. So you can see it forms like a bulbous part, and then over time it all swells up almost like an umbrella that's over flipped in the wind. It grows in a lot of places. It grows, of course, in autumn, but it prefers to grow under coniferous trees. Now we know about coniferous trees because they're very connected to the Christmas holidays, because we bring the trees inside, and all of those trees are coniferous. We find this in the book of John Marco Allegro, a very interesting book. Very couldn't continue without mentioning him. Very interesting author as well, although I think that his knowledge is incomplete, and so that is something that we're trying to do, is we're trying to fill in all the gaps here, so we can get a good understanding of what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it. This is the culture that it would originate from. These are the Saami. They're found in Norway, Sweden, Finland, in the Kola Peninsula in Russia, and you also find them, this is the connection, of course, with the North Pole. And these people, they would be reindeer herders, and the shamanic people, they would be called the Noaidi. So why they're called that, I have no idea. There's like a shamanic kind of ritual in which they would get the Amanita Muscaria, and they would have it in a kind of ritualistic way. They would eat it, and they would have these kind of hallucinogenic properties. Although it's not for the faint-hearted, and it's also not without any danger, because they might get killed, and so it's not a mushroom that will not do you any harm. It's almost like you need to be a chemist to understand what this mushroom does, And so in order for these people to filter the chemicals out that they wouldn't want, and to keep the ones that they would want, they would have this kind of disgusting thing that they would do. Reindeer herders. So if you wanted to get this kind of chemicals out, and you wouldn't want the harmful chemicals, and you wanted to keep the psychedelic chemicals, the No Idea would have a particular kind of practice which they would get it out. And that is, they would feed the mushroom to the reindeer. And then what they would do is they would wait until the reindeer would piss in the snow, and then you would gather the snow. And that is how you would get this psychedelic compound. And yeah, it's a very old tradition, is very connected to throughout all of Europe. This is, by the way, I found this picture. I like it very much. This is what the Saami do still today. They pull themselves by reindeer, you know, like Santa does. Although these are races. And I like this picture very much because it shows how an ancient culture can blend with modern culture. And I mean, just I get so happy by looking at the faces of these reindeer. I mean, look at how much fun they're having, especially the one in the middle. He's gonna win. All right, so we got to talk about gnomes. We cannot talk about mushrooms, Amanita Muscaria, if we don't talk about gnomes. Well, what are gnomes? Well, gnomes, they're wearing this hat, and they're spirit of the earth, and they're often portrayed underneath an Amanita Muscaria. They're supposed to live there in some kind of way. And also gnomes, I mean, ask anyone who has done a lot of psychedelic trips. It's not uncommon to see gnomes, to see little gnomes walking around. I even heard stories about them walking around with gold and everything. So yeah, they're creatures of the earth, and they're somehow connected with the earth. So a very, very interesting connection when we talk about Christmas. And so, yeah, if you get a psychedelic trip, it's not uncommon to see something like that. However, it's not only in Scandinavia that you find these kind of mushroom cults. So this is in Chapelle de Plaincourault in Marengy in France. And what we find here is we find a merger of Christian iconography with, well, this same kind of mushroom iconography, where you have the Adam and Eve, and Adam and Eve would of course be eating from the tree of life, and in this case you see it's a mushroom of life, when it is depicted as Amanita Muscaria with a red head and the white speckles on them, and there's a snake in the middle of them. There's other depictions as well, but just here's a picture of the church itself. And when you see at the picture of the church, you see at the top of them, like on the top of a Christmas tree, you can see it's a Yule. It's a 4-spoked Yule. Very important. So this is even though it's a chapel, it's a Christian symbol. It would very much be pointed towards people who would have a different practice, and they would do something like that. By the way, we also have this depiction, and it's kind of unclear to see it maybe, but what it is, it's a mother and child. It's Maria with baby Jesus. So very, very interesting, all of it. Now, we cannot talk about Christmas unless we talk about Saturnalia. And Saturnalia would be the Roman midwinter festival. So this is pre-Christian, and we still see a lot of similarities with what would be celebrated in the north. So Saturnalia, something interesting is it would be dedicated to the god of Saturn. And the god of Saturn, he's known as the god of renewal and rebirth. And you would find it very much in agriculture. You would find it in abundance, and in particular in Roman culture, it would be connected with liberation. Now, in the northern cultures, it was not connected with liberation because those people would already be free. There were no slaves in the Frisian culture. So interesting that it does happen here. And of course, in Saturnalia, the traditional roles and social norms were inverted. So slave owners would allow their slaves to act like masters at that point. The slave masters, they would kind of take a backseat position, and they would say, okay, you rule the house, and I'm gonna be going out drinking and celebrating the Saturnalia feast. This is not something that's by the Romans that they invented or anything. We can read it by Macrobius. He says, our ancestors instituted many fine customs, and this is the best. From the deepest chill, they produced the 7-day Saturnalia. And so very interesting that it comes from the deepest chill. Like it's almost like it comes from the cold part, so it comes from the north. And this is Lucian, who's a comedic writer, and he says this about the Saturnalia. It is a limited monarchy, you see. To begin with, it only lasts a week. That over, I am a private person, just a man in the street. Secondly, during my week, the Sirius is barred. No business allowed. Drinking and being drunk, and singing, and noise and games and dice, appointing of kings and feasting of slaves, singing naked, clapping of tremulous hands, an occasional ducking of court faces in icing water. Such are the functions over which I preside. So he gives a description of what he does on Saturnalia. So right away we can see this is not a very pious holiday. It is very much a holiday that has to do with the external. And of course the Romans, they were you could say they were very barbaric as well in their ways. I think that the Frisian people, they would look at the Romans and they would say those people are the real barbarians. Even though they might have the empire, you know, they might not have the real sophistication to understand what it is that they're actually celebrating. However, they did have a lot of interesting decorations. For instance, they would have the evergreen decoration, so the boughs of holly and the evergreens, they would be on the walls, and you know, as long as it's green, they would decorate with it. And as well, people would wear a red Dacian cap during the festivities. They would put it on, and it would be a symbol of freedom, and it would be red. So also they would light candles. So here's an incarnation of having the fire again. And of course, all of these symbols, you know, it's not hard to imagine that this would be still part of a modern celebration. But there's also very different celebrations as well at this Roman Saturnalia, and there would be slaughter, and there would be blood, and there would be killing in this feast as well. But we're not going to talk about that this week, because next week we're going to continue this episode and we're going to talk more about the origins of Christmas. Yeah, I hope you guys will be tuning in as well, because that will be the last and the fourth episode, part 4 of all the December festivals. And I hope you guys all enjoyed this episode. There's been an uplift on the channel recently, which makes me very happy. I'm glad I'm finding more and more people who think about things in the same way. I'm glad that people are subscribing. So I'm very happy that the channel's growing. I hope you guys like this episode too. If you do, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Please give it a like. and make sure you're subscribed. We need those subscriptions if we want to keep this channel growing. We want to raise more content, and we need those subscriptions. Also, make sure that you're sharing this episode whenever you're on Facebook, or if you're on Twitter, or you find this interesting. Maybe you're into pagan festivals, or maybe you're into Roman festivals, or maybe you're into the origins of where we all come from. Make sure that you share this on Twitter, on X, on Facebook, on Instagram, on whichever platform you're on, and share it all, and make sure that that all of that happens, so we can grow this channel up even more. Also, I want to remind you guys, please don't forget to visit our sponsor Druid Secret with all of these pagan origins and festivals. We should not forget about the Druids. We're going to talk about those more next week. But if you already want to get a little taste of what these Druids, what they could have sold you, well, then make sure you go to druidsecret.com, use the code ParadigmShift, make sure your medicine cabinet is filled up with the most natural and healthy medicine that's out there, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.